The morning sun rose slowly over Dubai International Airport, casting long golden reflections on the sleek metallic bodies of airplanes lined up for departure. Terminal 3 buzzed with life, rolling suitcases, distant announcements, and the rhythmic hum of jet engines. Among the travelers moving through Gate A17 was Adam Khan, a 20-year-old aviation student from Karachi. He clutched his boarding pass nervously, his eyes occasionally wandering to the runway beyond the glass. This wasn't just another flight for him. It was his first time traveling alone across continents. He had been selected to attend an advanced flight simulation workshop in London, a dream opportunity for any young pilot in training. As he walked down the jet bridge toward Flight 327, a massive Airbus A330 bound for Heathrow, Adam could feel his pulse quicken. The aircraft gleamed in the light, its engines idle but powerful, two giants waiting to awaken. The boarding music played softly, and friendly flight attendants greeted passengers with bright smiles. "Good morning, sir." "Seat 22A, just by the window," said the attendant. Adam nodded with a shy smile and found his seat near the wing. The view outside was mesmerizing. Mechanics were completing final checks, fueling trucks rolled away, and baggage carts zipped by like worker ants. Beside him sat an elderly British couple returning home after visiting their daughter in Dubai. The woman, Mrs. Thompson, smiled warmly. "First time flying alone, dear?" Adam laughed nervously. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because you've checked your seatbelt 3 times, she chuckled. As boarding finished, the captain's voice came over the intercom, deep, confident and calm. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Anderson speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 327, non-stop service from Dubai to London. Expected flight time is 7 hours and 20 minutes. Weather looks beautiful all the way, so sit back and enjoy the ride." Adam leaned back, exhaling. The engines roared to life, vibrations coursing through the cabin. He looked out as the aircraft began to taxi, the runway lights flickering beneath the morning haze. The rhythmic sound of flaps moving, the pilot's brief conversations with air traffic control. Every detail fascinated him. He had studied these moments for years in simulation labs, but now he was living them. The plane lined up on the runway. Adam's fingers pressed lightly against the armrest as the captain advanced the throttles. The engines thundered. Acceleration pinned everyone to their seats, a surge of controlled power. The wheels lifted, the ground fell away, and the city of Dubai stretched out below like a glittering map of gold and blue. From his window, Adam watched skyscrapers shrink into toy-like shapes, then disappear beneath a blanket of white clouds. The sun, now fully risen, painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. He whispered to himself, "One day I'll be up there, in the left seat." The seatbelt sign turned off. Flight attendants rolled their carts through the aisles, serving breakfast. The aroma of coffee filled the cabin. Adam pulled out his small notebook, filled with aircraft sketches, formulas, and takeoff notes. It was his treasure, something he'd been keeping since the first day of flight school. He scribbled a few notes about the takeoff speed and the cloud layer he observed outside. "Flaps 15, rotation maybe around 150 knots, he muttered. The elderly couple beside him exchanged amused glances. "You sound like you already work here," Mr. Thompson said with a grin. "Someday I hope to," Adam replied. Eyes still on the clouds. Hours passed peacefully. Children watched cartoons on screens. Businessmen typed on laptops, and a baby slept soundly 2 rows ahead. The cabin was calm, the steady hum of engines acting like a lullaby. Outside, endless white clouds rolled beneath them like waves of the sea. Occasionally, Adam visited the galley to chat with a friendly flight attendant named Maria. When she learned he was an aviation student, her face lit up. "Maybe one day you'll be flying me home," she teased. He smiled. "I'd be honored, Mom." He asked if he could peek into the cockpit after landing, something he had always dreamed of. She promised to ask the captain. That thought alone made him feel like a child waiting for Christmas morning. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, Adam adjusted his headset to listen to the onboard radio channel that broadcasted air traffic control chatter, a feature some airlines still offered. The crisp voices of pilots checking in and controllers giving headings fascinated him. He noted how calm and professional they all sounded. It was the sound of precision, of control. something he deeply admired. He ordered tea and looked outside again. The sky had turned a deeper shade of blue, almost blending into the darkness of space. Sunlight glinted off the wing, flashing across the cabin. He could see faint contrails of another aircraft far away, two white lines stretching endlessly across the heavens. For a brief moment, he thought about his parents back home. His mother had cried at the airport, reminding him to call when he landed. His father had simply said, "Make us proud, son." Adam smiled quietly, whispering, "I will." He didn't know that fate had been quietly writing a different flight plan, one no simulator could prepare him for. At that very moment, far ahead in the cockpit, Captain Anderson was discussing unexpected turbulence forming over the Mediterranean. Nothing serious, just a rough patch expected mid-flight. The co-pilot adjusted a few settings on the autopilot panel, marking the coordinates. To Adam, the day still seemed perfect, a routine flight above the clouds. He stretched his arms, took a sip of tea, and put on his headphones. The engines purred smoothly. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as passengers began to doze off. Yet somewhere in the silence of that vast sky, the seeds of chaos had already been planted. No one aboard Flight 327 could imagine that in just a few hours, a 20-year-old student sitting quietly by the window would hold the fate of 300 souls in his trembling hands. For now, everything was calm. The hum of engines, the laughter of passengers, the soft music playing through the cabin speakers. A flight like any other, but not for long. 2 hours had passed since takeoff. Flight 327 cruised smoothly above the Mediterranean Sea, sunlight glinting off its silver wings. The passengers had settled into their routines, some sleeping, others reading or watching movies. It was one of those perfectly uneventful flights that made everyone feel safe. Adam Khan sat quietly in his window seat, earbuds in, sketching the cockpit of an A330 from memory. The hum of the engines was steady, almost hypnotic. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, a brilliant blue ocean of air. Everything seemed peaceful. Then, without warning, the seatbelt sign dinged. A subtle vibration ran through the cabin, then another, stronger this time. The aircraft trembled slightly. Adam looked out the window and saw faint streaks of gray clouds forming below. Just turbulence, he thought. Normal at this altitude, but within seconds, the turbulence worsened. The aircraft jolted violently, trays rattled, drinks spilled, and startled gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Flight attendants hurried down the aisles, gripping seatbacks for balance. The captain's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We've hit some unexpected turbulence." Then, static. The announcement cut off mid-sentence. A moment of eerie silence followed. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Adam frowned. Something wasn't right. He'd flown enough simulators to know turbulence alone wouldn't cause a full communication drop. He looked around. Passengers were whispering nervously, mothers clutching children. A few tried to laugh it off, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Minutes passed. No further announcement came. Then suddenly a muffled alarm blared from the cockpit, a sharp, rhythmic beeping that pierced through the hum of the cabin. A flight attendant, Maria, the same one who had chatted with Adam earlier, rushed forward toward the flight deck. She knocked on the locked cockpit door. "Captain Anderson? First Officer Lee?" No response. She knocked again, harder this time. "Captain, please respond." Silence. Then came the unmistakable sound, a rapid depressurization warning. The oxygen masks dropped from the overhead panels with a snap. Screams erupted. Children cried. Instinctively, Adam grabbed his mask and pulled it over his face, securing the elastic band behind his head. The cabin lights dimmed as the aircraft suddenly pitched downward, a sharp dive. Drinks, bags, and papers flew into the air. The roar of the engines deepened, and passengers gripped their armrests in terror. Maria, still standing, clutched the galley wall for support. Her voice trembled as she shouted, Put your masks on. Everyone, now! Through the chaos, Adam's mind began racing. His training flashed before him. Pressurization failures, hypoxia, emergency descents. Something had gone horribly wrong in the cockpit. If both pilots were unresponsive, it could only mean one thing: loss of consciousness due to cabin pressure failure. He tried to steady his breathing through the oxygen mask, focusing on what he had learned. Stay conscious. Think clearly. The plane leveled out slightly, then began to climb again, but erratically, as if no one were fully in control. Passengers sobbed and prayed. The elderly couple beside Adam held hands tightly, eyes shut. Adam looked toward the cockpit. Maria had opened the emergency phone near the galley, speaking frantically with air traffic control. Her voice cracked. "This is Flight 327. We have an emergency. Both pilots are unresponsive. Repeat, both pilots are unresponsive." Static hissed through the phone. The ground operator replied faintly, his voice distorted. "Flight 327, confirm. Both pilots incapacitated. Who is flying the aircraft?" Maria hesitated, glancing back at the sealed cockpit door. "Autopilot is still on, but we don't know for how long." Adam's heart pounded. He stood, fighting the tremor in his legs. "Let me help," he said. Maria looked at him in shock. "Sir, please sit down. I'm an aviation student," he blurted. "I know aircraft systems, flight control basics. Please, you need someone who understands what's happening." She froze for a moment, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. The plane shuddered again, the lights flickering. In that instant, the situation's gravity sank in. There was no one else. "Come with me," she finally said, pulling him toward the front of the plane. They reached the cockpit door, still locked. Adam grabbed the interphone and shouted through it. "Captain! First officer! Can you hear me?" No answer. Maria entered the emergency override code, but the cockpit door didn't respond. Safety protocols prevented it from unlocking easily during flight. Adam's mind raced. They must be unconscious, maybe due to hypoxia. He spotted the small emergency oxygen system near the cockpit door and activated it for them, hoping fresh oxygen might revive the pilots. No response. The plane shook again. Another sharp dip. Some passengers screamed as the overhead bins rattled. Maria's voice cracked, panic surfacing. "If no one takes control, we'll lose her!" Adam looked at her, fear and resolve mixing in his eyes. "Then open it. Whatever it takes." She hesitated. "It's against procedure. This is life or death," he shouted. "We have 300 people back there depending on us." Maria stared at him for a heartbeat that felt like forever. Then she nodded and grabbed the emergency access key. The lock clicked, the door swung inward, and they stepped into a nightmare. The cockpit was filled with warning lights, red and amber blinking across every panel. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly beside the captain and co-pilot, both slumped over in their seats, motionless. The autopilot remained engaged, but alarms screamed about altitude fluctuations and system faults. Adam's training kicked in instantly. He moved to the co-pilot's seat, checked the main display, and spoke to Maria without looking up. "Help me secure them. Get oxygen masks on the pilots. I'll check the controls." Maria followed orders, tears welling in her eyes. Adam's hands trembled slightly as he grabbed the control column. The autopilot was fighting turbulence, struggling to maintain altitude. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Let's keep her steady." Outside, clouds swallowed the jet completely. The horizon gone, visibility near zero. Inside, chaos gave way to a single, terrifying reality. A 20-year-old student was now the only conscious person in the cockpit of a passenger jet carrying 300 souls, and the flight was far from over. Adam slid into the co-pilot's seat, his pulse pounding in his ears. The cockpit was alive with blinking lights and the constant chime of warnings. The oxygen masks on the two pilots still hung uselessly. Both men were unconscious, heads bowed forward. Adam pressed trembling fingers to the autopilot controls, praying the system was still holding the aircraft level. His voice shook as he grabbed the headset lying beside the captain's armrest and pulled it over his ears. He pressed the transmit button. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," he said, his words coming out faster than he expected. "This is Flight 327. Both pilots are unresponsive. Passenger attempting to maintain control. Request immediate assistance." For a few seconds, all he heard was static. Then a voice broke through, calm, clipped, unmistakably professional. "Flight 327, this is Ankara Center. Confirm you are a passenger in control of the aircraft?" Adam swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. My name is Adam Khan. I'm a 20-year-old aviation student. I have simulator experience, but no real flight hours. I need help landing this plane." There was a brief pause. The controller's tone softened. "All right, Adam, you're doing great. The autopilot appears to be engaged. Can you confirm your altitude and heading?" Adam scanned the primary flight display. The numbers swam before his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. "Altitude 35,000 feet. Heading 290. Copy that," came the reply. "We'll coordinate with Turkish air traffic control and guide you step by step. First, keep your hands off the control column unless the plane starts to pitch. Let the autopilot do the work. Are you wearing an oxygen mask?" "Yes," Adam said, adjusting the strap on his face. His voice echoed slightly inside it. His palms were slick with sweat, but he tried to steady his breathing. Maria hovered beside the cockpit doorway, watching in stunned silence. The captain's chest rose faintly under the mask Adam had secured, but he still showed no sign of waking. She whispered, "Can he do this?" Adam didn't look at her. "We don't have a choice," he said quietly. Ankara Center spoke again. "Adam, we're transferring you to Istanbul approach. They'll help you bring the plane down there. Maintain current altitude. When you're ready, I want you to place your right hand on the autopilot disconnect switch. Don't press it yet." Adam nodded, even though no one could see him. "Right hand on switch. Good. Now look at your attitude indicator, the artificial horizon. Keep the wings level, the nose on the line. You're doing perfectly." The voice guided him with calm precision. Step by step, instruction by instruction, Adam's fear began to melt into focus. He recognized many of the instruments from his training, the throttle levers, the flaps, the altimeter. But seeing them in real life, knowing the lives of 300 people depended on his every movement, made his stomach twist. He glanced out the cockpit window. Clouds stretched endlessly in every direction, thick and gray. He couldn't see the ground, just shifting mist and flashes of sunlight. He felt like a small bird lost in a storm. "Flight 327, this is Istanbul approach." "Adam, we have you on radar," a new voice said. "We'll vector you toward runway 05, right?" "It's long and clear. Are you ready to begin descent?" Adam hesitated. "Ready," he said finally. His throat was dry. "Copy. Set altitude selector to 10,000 feet and start your descent at 1,000 feet per minute. Throttles back slightly." He reached forward, fingers trembling, and turned the small knob on the autopilot panel. The plane began to descend slowly. The sensation of losing altitude pressed lightly against his stomach. Behind him, the passengers could feel the change too. Voices rose, some fearful, some praying. Maria relayed updates from the cockpit to the cabin crew. She returned to Adam's side and handed him a bottle of water. "You need to stay hydrated," she said. He managed a small nod, barely able to take a sip. As the plane descended through 20,000 feet, the turbulence worsened. The autopilot struggled to maintain heading. Adam could feel it through the control column, tiny tremors of resistance. The warning tone chimed again, a dull, repetitive sound that made his nerves fray. "Istanbul approach," he said, trying to sound calm. "The aircraft is buffeting. Feels unstable." "Understood, Flight 327. Wind shear reported in your sector. Reduce speed to 250 knots. Use gentle control inputs." "You're doing excellent, Adam." He adjusted the throttles, his left hand shaking. The engines responded with a soft hum as the aircraft slowed. The turbulence eased slightly. He took a long, shaky breath. "Okay," the controller said. "We're almost ready for final approach. You'll need to disconnect autopilot soon." "Do you see the runway lights yet?" Adam squinted through the windshield. The clouds were thinning. A faint glimmer appeared ahead. 2 rows of tiny white lights stretching into the distance. His heart skipped. "Runway in sight," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Good job. When I say press the autopilot disconnect and take manual control, keep your movements small. The aircraft wants to fly. Just guide it. He braced himself, hand hovering over the button. Ready? Disconnect autopilot now. A sharp click. The controls went alive in his hands, vibrating gently with the wind. The plane wobbled slightly, dipping to the left. Passengers gasped as trays rattled again. Adam corrected, easing the yoke to the right, bringing the wings level. Nice recovery, the controller said. Now bring your nose down 2 degrees. Maintain glide path. You're lined up perfectly. The runway grew larger by the second. Adam's breath came faster. Sweat rolled down his temple. The city lights twinkled below, rivers of gold threading through the darkness. He could almost make out the airport buildings, the rescue trucks waiting near the strip. Maria clutched the back of the captain's chair, whispering a prayer under her breath. Adam's knuckles were white on the controls. Every second felt like an hour. The altimeter wound down 2,000 feet. 1,000? Flaps 30, came the voice in his headset. Gear down. He pulled the lever. The deep mechanical hum of the landing gear filled the cabin. The green indicators lit up. Good, Adam, you're almost there. Keep her steady. You're doing this. The ground loomed closer, lights racing toward them. Adam could hear his own heartbeat louder than the engines. The aircraft floated, then began to sink toward the runway. He made a tiny correction on the yoke, keeping the nose perfectly aligned. And then, through the roar of air and the screams and the prayers, came the single most beautiful sound in aviation, the thud of tires meeting earth. The voice in Adam's headset was calm but firm, a lifeline cutting through the storm of fear in his mind. Flight 327, you're 3 miles from touchdown. Stay on glide path. You're looking perfect. His hands were slick with sweat. His shirt clung to his back. The yoke felt heavy, alive, trembling with the pulse of the engines. Outside the cockpit window, the lights of Istanbul shimmered like a constellation against the dark. Rain streaked across the glass, catching the glow of the approach lamps. For a moment it didn't feel real, just a simulation, another night in the Flight Academy lab. But the screams behind the cockpit door reminded him that this was no simulation. 300 hearts waited for what he would do next. The wind buffeted the aircraft, nudging it off the center line. Adam corrected, small movements, just like he had practiced. His voice was barely a whisper. Easy, easy. He remembered his instructor's advice, don't fight the plane. Fly with it, altitude 500, the radio crackled. You're doing great, Adam, hold your pitch. Keep your eyes on the runway. The runway lights glowed brighter, 2 parallel lines stretching into infinity. He could see emergency vehicles waiting at the far end, tiny red and blue lights flickering like fireflies. The ground rose fast now. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every second stretched like a lifetime. At 200 feet, the controller said, "Begin your flare gently. Bring the nose up just a touch. Throttle's idle." Adam eased the control column back. The engines whined softly as the thrust reduced. The descent slowed. He felt the main landing gear reach for the earth. Then it happened. 2 solid thuds, a quick bounce, then the long, blessed screech of rubber on asphalt. The jet settled, nose wheel down, rolling straight and true along the runway. The roar of the reverses filled the cabin. They were on the ground. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the cabin erupted in applause and sobs. People cried out prayers, names, words of disbelief. Maria sank into the nearest seat and covered her face, shaking with relief. Adam's hands were still locked on the controls. He didn't dare move until the aircraft slowed to taxi speed. Flight 327, welcome to Istanbul, came the voice in his headset, warm now, almost trembling with emotion. You did it, son. You brought her home. Adam exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. His vision blurred. His muscles ached. He pulled off the headset and looked at the unconscious pilots beside him. Paramedics were already waiting outside. Through the cockpit window, he could see flashing lights racing toward them. Fire trucks, ambulances, airport security. He turned to Maria. "Tell them we're safe," he said quietly. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, and rushed to make the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice quavered over the intercom, "we have landed safely in Istanbul. Please remain seated." The cabin broke into another wave of applause, louder this time, echoing through the fuselage. Passengers hugged strangers, children clapped, someone shouted Adam's name. The aircraft came to a complete stop at the end of the runway. The door opened and cold night air swept through. The smell of jet fuel mixed with the scent of rain. Paramedics hurried aboard, tending first to the pilots. Others approached Adam, helping him unbuckle his harness. "Are you all right, son?" one of them asked. Adam nodded weakly. His legs trembled when he tried to stand. "I just need air," he murmured. They guided him out of the cockpit, down the steps, onto the tarmac. The wet asphalt gleamed under the runway lights. He looked up and saw the massive jet towering over him, engines still ticking as they cooled. 100 camera flashes blinked from the terminal windows. The reality of what he had done began to sink in. He had taken control of an airliner mid-flight, flown it through turbulence and chaos, and landed it, something even trained pilots could fail to do under pressure. And he was only 20. Reporters swarmed near the terminal, but the airport staff kept them back. Medical teams escorted passengers into buses for transfer to the terminal. Adam sat on a stretcher beside the runway, wrapped in a blanket, watching the scene unfold. His mind was strangely quiet. One of the rescuers crouched beside him. "You saved 300 people tonight," the man said softly. "How did you do it?" Adam looked down at his hands, still shaking, and gave a faint smile. "I just did what I had to do." Hours later, in the bright lights of the airport terminal, investigators and journalists surrounded him. They asked the same questions over and over: how he knew what to do, what went through his mind, whether he'd ever flown before. He answered calmly, modestly, never once raising his voice. He spoke of his instructors, of his love for aviation, of how fear faded the moment he realized people were depending on him. When news of Flight 327 spread, headlines called it a miracle. Television channels played footage of the landing over and over again, the wheels touching down in perfect alignment, sparks flying from the tires. Across social media, people called him the hero in the sky. Pilots and instructors from around the world sent messages of admiration. Aviation schools offered him scholarships. Airlines extended invitations to meet their crews, but Adam stayed quiet. All he wanted was to call his parents. When they answered, his mother's voice broke with tears. "You're safe?" she whispered. "I'm safe, Ami," he said. "Everyone is safe." There was a long pause on the line. Then she said the words he'd dreamed of hearing his whole life. "We are proud of you, my son." In the days that followed, experts studied the cockpit recordings. They said his reactions were textbook perfect, his decision-making calm under impossible pressure. The senior controller from Istanbul later admitted, "When I heard that boy's voice, I thought we'd lose them all." But he flew like a professional. Weeks later, standing on the same runway where he had landed, Adam looked up at another plane taking off into the dawn sky. The engines thundered, the lights lifted into the clouds. He closed his eyes and felt the wind brush his face, warm and alive. He knew, deep down, that his life had changed forever. Not because the world now knew his name, but because in those 45 minutes above the clouds, he had discovered the strength that hides inside ordinary people when there's no one else left to rely on. The engines faded into the distance. The sky began to brighten. For the first time in days, Adam allowed himself to smile. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a pilot who had brought everyone home.